Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of the Blackbird Grimoire. Welcome back to our series Pagan Tales, and it is July in Cancer season, so we are focusing upon deities of the sea or those who are strongly related to the water element. And today we are finally coming to the granddaddy of sea gods, which is Poseidon. And I would venture to guess that for the vast majority of people, if they think about who is the god of the sea, they're going to almost automatically think of the god Poseidon. Now, obviously, not necessarily all pagans, because a lot of people are familiar with Njord if they're on the north side of things, or they're familiar with Manon and Maculir if they're a little bit more Celtic focused. But for just your general person, Poseidon is going to be that immediate idea that springs to their mind. So he was the Greek god not only of the seas and rivers, but also of storms, earthquakes, and horses. The meaning of his name is husband of the earth or lord of the earth, which really denotes that relationship that he has with the visible earthly realm. His parents were Kronos and Rhea, of course. His wife is called Amphitrite, and there's a lot of children of Poseidon. I did not have room to list all of them, and not all of them were conceived with his wife. He was a he spread his seed, we shall say. But the first child to be mentioned is Triton, who was a merman. That is actually one thing that Disney got right in The Little Mermaid. Then we have Theseus, who is the slayer of the Minotaur. Polyphemus, who was blinded by Odysseus, and that created a huge conflict and controversy between Poseidon and Odysseus for, well, obvious reasons. Then Pegasus by Medusa, Rhodos, a sea goddess, Benthesikimi, which I'm sure I mispronounced, and I'm sorry, best I could do today. But she was associated with the sea. Then Arion, who is a swift horse by Demeter. There's actually kind of a funny story with this. Poseidon decided that he wanted to go bang Demeter. Demeter was not inclined. She transformed herself into a horse. He also transformed himself into a horse, outran her, and vanquished her, and then Arion was born. It's interesting about how these various myths and legends come about, because one of the characteristics of Arion was being extremely swift. He was actually featured in other myths, helping great heroes, get from hither to thither. I think actually he appeared in one of the Herculean myths, but I would need to recheck older notes to be sure of that. But there's that one. Then there's Despoinia of the Akkadian mysteries, Bellerophon, who slew the Chimera, and Orion the giant and hunter. And we could go on, but I felt like these particular children were really the highlights. Now, moving on. Some of the symbols associated with Poseidon would be the trident, of course, that three pitchfork. It represents his dominion over the sea, and also an instrument by which to control it. One of his other symbols is the horse. He is actually the god of horses and the creation of the horse, and he's associated with horse races. So really, whenever we have horse races nowadays, especially in a coastal region, if we had a more pagan society, that would be a good opportunity to have a little honoring ceremony, and perhaps and perhaps present an offering to Poseidon for that. But that's just notes. We should start thinking of these ideas now, so that as we become more prevalent within society, we already have ideas about how to express that more publicly. Also associated with the bull, bulls were often sacrificed to Poseidon. They represent strength and fertility. And of course, he's linked with the dolphin, embodying the intelligence and a connection to the sea, as well as fish and other marine creatures, which of course represents his rule over the oceans just generally. But I would say, as far as any marine type animals, really his chief symbol would be the dolphin. Now for navigation. The Greeks, of course, as most of us are known, where they were very avid sailors. They were no stranger to the sea, whether it was for pleasure cruising or for trade, military purposes. A lot of time was spent on boats because they were a Mediterranean society. And so worship of Poseidon was a consistent and enduring, just out of sheer practicality. There was always a reason to bring him into things because he related to so much of their daily life. And it would have been the height of imprudence. That's also a lesson for us today. Whatever our environment is, whatever our profession is, whatever the realities of our day-to-day life is, if we are neglecting deities related to those things, probably not the best idea of our part. So that might be something for us all to meditate on at a later time. So let's talk about his temperament. Poseidon is known to be aggressive, tempestuous, and altogether unpredictable, not the easiest personality to get along with, and there's just no telling what he might do. So that should really come as no surprise to us because his nature is a reflection of the very nature of water. The water is also can be very aggressive and tempestuous, unpredictable. And when we think about the character of the Mediterranean Sea, about how that general area tends to be a bit seismically active, and of course that has its impact on the waterways, well, then it's not really terribly shocking that the god associated with that sea would also be ascribed to those particular characteristics. He really represents the dangers of traversing the waters, the need to be cautious in what we do, but also to be quick thinking so we can respond to anything that does arise and to just show respect for nature's power. Now, despite all those mood swings, Poseidon was also considered to be the guardian of all seafarers, as well as many Greek cities and colonies. So, a difficult personality does not render a deity, or a human for that matter, from effectively performing the role of a protector. And sometimes those unsociable traits actually make it easier for a person to do what needs to be done when danger arises. So, as with all things, there's how we look at a god's personality characteristics, his traits, his mode of being, our perspective and the situation and the circumstances surrounding it really play a huge role in shaping what's really fitting in that moment. There's different ways to be looking at things, and now there isn't a one size fits all interpretation that's going to be appropriate all the time. Now, celebrations. Now, some, but not all Greek calendars, they actually had a month that was named Poseidon, and this was usually placed around the time of the winter solstice. Now, most of us are aware that the Romans they had Saturn and Saturnalia around the time of the winter solstice, but apparently, for the Greeks, at least for some of them, that was more of a time where Poseidon was a bit more presence, despite the fact that they probably were not at sea at that time of year. In Athens, there was a celebration called the Poseidia. That was in honor of Poseidon, just overtly. Then in Lucius, so there was a festival called Haloia on the 26th day of the month of Poseidon, and during that time there was a procession in his honor. And then in Aegina, they had a Poseidonia, which was possibly also around the same month of Poseidon. It was originally a 16-day feast, and then it was later expanded to 2 months due to its popularity. And let's be real, the Greeks, they enjoy a good party. Nothing has really changed about that as far as pagans are concerned. We like to get together and enjoy ourselves, don't we? So now for the modern revival. He is once again being actively worshipped, and he is a very relevant deity for coastal regions, islands, people who sail the seas for pleasure or for business or for military purposes. You are coming into contact, essentially with his realm. And so it would make sense to give him some attention. And in addition to studying about him, which, of course, if you're going to be more involved with the deity, you absolutely should. But it's also what I saw recommended is that devotees commit to disciplined meditation and dream work to better connect with Poseidon, because those two modalities in general have been presented as being very effective for people. And also making art in his honor has been another means of creating and maintaining that connection. Now, to finish things off for Poseidon, let's talk about some offerings, just in case you do feel inclined to say hello to him. Seawater, sea salt, seafood, obvious things we could do. Meditation, prayer, hymns in his honor, offerings of beef and lamb, caring for horses, particularly if there's a horse charity. Sometimes I know there are some for retired racehorses that have, they're put out to pasture and just they're having, a nice little retirement. Involving yourself in that way would be a way of showing him respect. Use sea glass and seashells when creating shrines for him. Compose poetry, song, music, story in his honor, and even offering up little model boats. And of course, if you're doing that, it's suggested to use a material that can easily break down, because we don't want to be, adding to gunk in the oceans that should not be there to begin with. But that is what I have for you on Poseidon. If you haven't worked with him before, I hope you at least found this interesting. And if you have worked with him before, well, I hope I gave him justice as and a good introduction to everyone. Let me know what you think about all of it in the comments below. I'd always look forward to hearing from you. And of course, I will see you guys next week in this series where we'll be talking about Coventina. So see you then, and bye for now.